They called themselves Apex. Not metaphorically, not as a boast. It was a biological classification, stamped into their scientific records the same way humans might write Homo sapiens at the top of a taxonomy chart. The Vorrkai had no natural predators. They never had. In 400,000 years of recorded history, not a single Vorrkai had ever been hunted. Let that sink in. Every other species in the known galaxy had something that kept them humble: prey instincts, a nervous system wired for run, a limbic ghost that whispered danger before the brain could even process the shape in the shadows. The Vorrkai had none of that. They were 8 feet tall, carbon-reinforced bone structure, skin that could deflect low-caliber kinetic rounds. They secreted a pheromone that triggered involuntary fear responses in most oxygen-breathing species within a 12-meter radius. Their eyes could track motion at speeds that made most creatures appear frozen. The Galactic Senate classified them as a Category 9 sovereign species. Category 9. The scale only goes to 10, and 10 was reserved for hypothetical extinction-level organisms that hadn't actually been discovered yet. The Vorrkai found this amusing. They joined the Interstellar Coalition not because they needed allies, but because they were bored. Diplomacy was theater. War was exercise. Other species were curiosities, fascinating in the way an anthill is fascinating, complex, busy, completely unaware of how fragile they truly are. Then humanity applied for coalition membership. The Vorrkai Review Board processed the application in under 4 minutes. Bipedal, soft tissue exterior, no natural armor, no venom, no enhanced sensory array. Average lifespan of roughly 80 years. A blink by Vorrkai standards. The species had only achieved interstellar travel 3 centuries ago. The board stamped the application. P. Rovisional, non-threat, observation status. Standard procedure for soft species. But there was a footnote in the human application that one junior analyst flagged before the file was archived. It was easy to overlook. The coalition intake forms had a section titled Domesticated Companion Species, a field most civilizations left blank or filled with livestock classifications. Humanity listed 1. Canis lupus familiaris. Common name, dog. The analyst almost didn't bother reading the attachment. Domesticated fauna wasn't a security consideration. It wasn't even worth a second glance. But something made her open the file. Maybe professional thoroughness, maybe instinct, which, unlike the Vorrkai, she still had. What she read made her pause. Humans had co-evolved with this animal for over 15,000 years. Not as a food source, not as a beast of burden. The relationship was symbiotic in ways that had no clean scientific category. The dog had been selectively shaped to read human emotion, not just body language, but micro-expressions, cortisol levels, subtle shifts in breath rhythm. The animal could detect human fear before the human consciously experienced it. And in return, the dog responded. Not with compliance, not with programmed obedience, with something that every xenobiologist who reviewed the data quietly agreed was unprecedented in any domesticated species across the coalition. Loyalty. The kind that didn't calculate odds, the kind that didn't recognize the word retreat. The analyst flagged it, wrote a 3-line note, sent it up the chain. It was filed under miscellaneous, low priority. 3 years later, when Ambassador Vorrkai Senn boarded the human diplomatic vessel Perseverance for the first time, he brought 2 armed escorts, a translation matrix, and the complete biological superiority of his species. Humanity's chief diplomat brought one thing, her dog. And when Senn stepped through the airlock, when his pheromones flooded the corridor, the kind that made coalition senators weep without knowing why, the dog looked up, and it did not flinch. The dog's name was Biscuit, 42 pounds, beagle mix, one ear that stood up and one that didn't. a scar along his left flank from an incident with a fence that his owner, Ambassador Dr. Yara Osei, had never fully explained to anyone. Biscuit had no combat training, no neural enhancements, no weapon classification of any kind. He weighed less than one of Senn's hands, and he was staring directly at the Vorrkai ambassador with the calm, focused intensity of something that had decided, without drama, without ceremony, that this corridor belonged to him. Senn stopped walking. This was not a thing that happened to Senn. His escorts exchanged a glance. The translation matrix continued its soft ambient hum. Nobody spoke. Because what do you say when a creature that has never, in 400,000 years of biological history, felt the need to stop? Stops? Dr. Osei crouched slightly and rested one hand on Biscuit's back, not pulling him away, not apologizing, just present. The gesture was so casual, it almost read as an insult. Ambassador Senn, her voice was warm, measured. Welcome aboard the Perseverance. Senn's translator processed the words. His eyes did not leave the dog. What is that? He said. It wasn't quite a question. That's Biscuit. A pause. It is not afraid of me. Dr. Osei tilted her head slightly. A human expression Senn's cultural briefing had categorized as mild amusement, non-aggressive. No, she said, he's not. Senn had encountered hundreds of species. He had walked into rooms and watched diplomats, trained, decorated, medicated diplomats, begin to shake. The pheromone response wasn't cruelty. It was simply chemistry. His body did it automatically, the same way a deep-sea fish generates light. He couldn't turn it off. Every species had broken, every single one. He studied the animal. It studied him back. Its nose worked steadily, processing him, reading him in whatever primitive chemical language it used. And then it did something Senn's cultural briefing had absolutely not prepared him for. It wagged its tail. Not frantically, not submissively, just a single, slow sweep, almost like a greeting between equals. Senn's lead escort, Commander Vael, leaned close and said quietly in Vorrkai, "Should I remove it?" Senn said nothing for a long moment. No. He stepped forward. The diplomatic summit proceeded. Biscuit walked beside Dr. Osei the entire time, occasionally glancing up at Senn with those dark, uncomplicated eyes. Not challenging, not cowering, simply watching. The way something watches when it has already made its assessment and found you neither threat nor god. Just another thing in the room. That night, Senn filed a private report to the Vorrkai Science Directorate. He was a precise communicator. His reports were usually 3 to 4 paragraphs, clinical and exact. This one ran to Nin. 18 pages. He had questions. What evolutionary pathway produces an animal with no survival-based fear response? How does a species that's soft, that physically unimpressive, end up bonded to something that doesn't flinch at Category 9 pheromones? What does it mean that humans brought this animal not as a weapon, not as a demonstration, but simply because she wanted him there? And underneath all of it, the question he almost didn't write. The one that sat at the bottom of the report like something half-buried. If the dog is not afraid of us, what does the dog know that we don't? He sent the report. He did not sleep well. And somewhere in the Perseverance Us crew quarters, Biscuit curled against Yara's legs and closed his eyes. Completely, perfectly calm. The Science Directorate responded in 6 hours. That was unusual. Normally, bureaucratic channels took weeks. The fact that 19 pages from a field ambassador triggered a same-day response told Senn everything about how seriously they were taking it. The response was 4 words. Send us the animal. Senn read it twice. Then he did something he had never done in 30 years of diplomatic service. He ignored a direct order, not refused, not filed a counter-petition, simply didn't respond. Closed the channel, returned to his morning briefing. Because something in his gut, that deep ancient Vorrkai instinct that wasn't fear but was adjacent to it, the one that said this situation requires more information before action, told him that taking Biscuit away from Dr. Osei would be a mistake. He couldn't explain why. That bothered him more than anything. The summit continued for 3 days. Trade frameworks, navigation rights, the standard diplomatic machinery of coalition expansion. Senn was good at this. He had negotiated with 17 species across 40 years. He knew how to read a room, find leverage, apply pressure, hit exactly the right moment. But he kept watching the dog. Biscuit moved through the Perseverance like he owned it. Crew members, human crew members, would drop into crouches mid-task just to scratch his ears. Hard-faced security officers, senior engineers with doctorates, they all did it, automatically, without embarrassment. Like it was the most natural thing in the universe to interrupt your work to acknowledge this small, floppy-eared animal padding down the corridor. And Biscuit accepted all of it with the same unhurried dignity. On the second day, something happened that Senn did not include in any official report. He was walking alone, a rare thing, but he'd dismissed his escorts for an hour, needing silence the way all Vorrkai did periodically. He turned a corner near the observation deck and nearly walked into Biscuit, who had apparently escaped Dr. Osei's quarters and was conducting his own solo patrol. They stood facing each other. No handlers, no diplomats, no translators. Biscuit looked up at him, that steady, calm gaze, the nose working, reading the air between them with instruments Senn's science couldn't fully map, because for all the Directorate's research, they still didn't completely understand what a dog smelled when it smelled a person. Emotion-linked chemical compounds, hormonal shifts, something even finer than that, something the human researchers described with the uncomfortable word intention. Dogs could smell intention. Senn crouched down. He didn't know why he did it. It wasn't in any diplomatic protocol. It reduced his height by 3 feet and put him much closer to this animal's level, which was objectively unnecessary, but he did it. Biscuit stepped forward and pushed his nose against Senn's forearm. Just once. Brief, like a confirmation. Then he sat down and continued looking at him with those dark, easy eyes. And Senn felt something crack open in his chest. Not painfully, but undeniably, like a door he hadn't known was shut. He had no name for what the feeling was. The Vorrkai language had many words for dominance, for respect, for cautious alliance. It did not have a clean word for being seen without being judged. He would later spend 2 weeks trying to find one. He didn't. Back in the Directorate, the 4-word message sat unanswered in his outbox, and 3 analysts had begun pulling every scrap of data on human-canine co-evolution, getting increasingly quiet as they read. Because buried in 15,000 years of history was a pattern. Every species that ever underestimated the dog had done so only once. The data was older than the coalition itself. 12,000 years before humanity achieved spaceflight, before they had writing, before they had cities, they had dogs at the edge of their fires. Not chained, not caged, chosen. The dog had approached the human camp first. That detail kept surfacing in the xenoanthropological record, and it kept making the Directorate analysts uncomfortable, though none of them could articulate exactly why. The animal had chosen this. That changed everything about how you read the relationship. Lead analyst coordinator Phyllis pulled the military records next. She almost didn't. Military history felt like a detour from the biological question, but something Senn had written in his report nagged at her. What does the dog know that we don't? She found her answer on page 3. Humans had taken dogs to war, not as weapons, not strapped with explosives or trained purely for killing, though some of that existed too, and she noted it without flinching. But the primary role, repeated across culture after culture, across every continent on Earth, was something else entirely. Detection, warning, protection. Dogs had walked into tunnels that humans couldn't see through, crossed terrain laced with hidden explosives, following a thread of scent so precise It defied the best sensor technology the Coalition had developed for another 8,000 years. They had guarded wounded soldiers through nights that lasted forever, keeping watch so the humans could sleep, positioning themselves between their person and the dark, and they had done all of it without being ordered to. That was the part that stopped Felis cold. Trained, yes. Directed, yes. But in the field, in the moments that mattered, dogs made decisions. Independent assessments. They chose when to alert, when to stand firm, when to place themselves in the path of something terrible because. See, the math was simply, my person is behind me, therefore I am between them and this. No calculation of odds, no self-preservation override. Just the equation, solved instantly, every time. She flagged 17 documented cases of dogs dying in combat, not because they failed to escape, but because escaping would have meant leaving their handler exposed. 17. Across multiple wars, multiple centuries. Felis sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then she pulled the Vorrkai fear pheromone studies. The Coalition had run controlled exposure tests on dozens of species over the years. The data was comprehensive and, frankly, had always made for uncomfortable reading if you thought about it too hard. Response times, freeze durations, involuntary physiological collapse. Some species lost motor function within seconds. There was one test on a canine subject. One, run by a human-affiliated research team 40 years ago, before the Coalition had formalized xenobiology ethics protocols. The dog had been a German shepherd named Otto. Otto had been exposed to a recorded Vorrkai pheromone sample, not a live ambassador, just a chemical recording, at standard concentration levels. Otto had barked at the speaker, once, sharp, territorial. Then he'd looked at his handler, confirmed the handler was unconcerned, and lay down. The researchers had noted, almost as an afterthought, that Otto's cortisol levels dropped after the bark, like the act of responding had resolved the situation internally, filed it away, closed the loop, identified, addressed, done. Felis forwarded everything to Senn with a single line of commentary. The dog isn't unafraid because it's broken. It's unafraid because it already decided what it would do. Senn read it standing up. Then he looked across the summit table at Dr. Osei, who was calmly reviewing a trade clause, and at Biscuit, asleep under her chair, one ear twitching at sounds no one else could hear. Guarding, even now, even here. He had spent 40 years believing apex meant alone at the top. He was beginning to understand it could mean something else entirely. I see you. I have decided you are worthy of this. Senn crouched down for the second time. He placed one large hand, gently, carefully, on top of Biscuit's head. The dog leaned into it. Neither of them moved for a long moment. The escorts didn't breathe. And somewhere in that corridor on a human diplomatic vessel at the edge of Coalition space, something shifted that had no entry in any treaty, no clause C in any framework, no category in any xenobiological classification system. Senn filed his final report that evening. It was long, longer than the first, but the conclusion was short enough to read in a single breath, and it spread through the directorate within hours, and then through the broader Coalition xenobiology community, and eventually, much later, in a way nobody had quite planned, into the public record where it would be quoted, argued over, and quietly understood for generations. We have classified ourselves as apex on the basis that nothing hunts us. We believed this was the highest state a species could achieve, to stand at the top, accountable to nothing, feared by everything. We were mistaken. The human animal is soft. It is slow. It has no armor, no venom, no pheromone cascade that breaks the nervous systems of lesser creatures. By every metric we have used to measure dominance, it should not have survived. And yet it not only survived, it formed a bond with another creature and made that creature into something that does not fear us, not through genetic engineering, Not through chemical augmentation, through 15,000 years of simply being worthy of loyalty. We have spent 400,000 years becoming something nothing would dare challenge. They spent the same time becoming something a dog would die for. I am no longer certain which of us built the better empire. The report was classified within a week. It leaked within a month, and somewhere on Earth, in a house with a crooked fence and a worn-out dog bed, Biscuit slept against Yara's legs, one ear up, still listening, still keeping watch. Because that was the thing about dogs that no classification system had ever quite managed to capture. They never really went off duty.